Morning explorers, we're back here in York today, heading over to Manchester for the 40th anniversary of Threads. Let's dig in. So what's Threads, I hear you ask? Threads is a BBC docudrama TV film made in 1983, originally broadcast in 1984. The programme is about the transition to war, so the period before war, the period of the actual nuclear attack, and then the post-attack nuclear winter. It's set in Sheffield. It's primarily based around two families, the Kemps and the Becketts, as well as the council offices in Sheffield. This year marks the 40th anniversary since its original broadcast. After it was broadcast, the film was found to be quite hard-hitting, and BBC basically never aired it again. You can buy it on Amazon on a special 2K remastered release. So this is the 40th anniversary since the original release of Threads. So I'm off to Complex in Manchester, where we're going to watch it on the big screen. Let's enjoy. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you like this kind of content, please do subscribe to the channel. And finally, if you would like to, please buy me a coffee using the link. Thank you. So I have arrived here in Manchester at Victoria Station. I'm now heading down to Piccadilly Station to see one of my explorer friends. Then we're going to head up to the Threads screening up at the Complex. You can probably tell I've come a bit of a detour, so watch to the end of the video where you will see some bonus footage all about the Guardian exchange. See you soon. If you find yourselves in Manchester and you want to drink and you want somewhere to explore, our next stop is going to be right up your street. Think less of the Winchester Arms, but it's where I'd want to spend my final hours if the bomb went off. So here we are, guys, we're at Temple in Manchester. This is a former toilet built by the Victorians, but is now a really nice bar. Hopefully we'll get to explore it later, because my friend and fellow sub-Britter, Phil Catt, the tunnel inspector on social media, hopefully we'll get to explore this later. I've already been down there, but it is just down the road from Oxford Road Station, just down there, a couple of 100 metres down there. Great place to come and have a drink if you're in Manchester. I'd thoroughly recommend it. Hi guys, no visit to Manchester to see a nuclear war movie would be complete without a visit to the site behind me. I am at the Guardian Exchange in Manchester. Guardian Exchange is famous for carrying the Moscow to Washington DC hotline. You probably know it from movies where there's a red telephone, but there was never any red telephone in existence. It was just a telex-based service. It ran over TAT1, which is the transatlantic telephone, which went from the North American mainland. Line made landfall in the UK at Oban. It was then routed via Oban down to Glasgow, Glasgow to Manchester, which is the Guardian Exchange behind me just there. From there it went down to the Anchor Exchange in Birmingham, and Birmingham on to London, where it went through the famous Kingsway Exchange. Now the Anchor Exchange, the Guardian Exchange behind me and the Kingsway were all deep level, so they're about 35 metre down, protected exchanges run by British Telecom. They were part funded by the UK and part funded by our NATO allies, and the system is still in use today but isn't routed through this exchange.
But surely it's better to see it in company, and we can all go outside afterwards and have a drink, or of course go on Phil's Cold War walk. But Phil has promised he'll bring everyone back here afterwards for a drink. But yeah, you're in company, you're with like-minded people. We all know how traumatising it can be. So but just have, spare a thought for me, so as I told you. So I'm going to hand over to Sean now, and he will have a talk with you about it. Sean, of course, is the one who brought a handheld air raid siren, as if we're not nervous enough.
I'm going to try and get up on the stage. Look at that. Getting back off is the problem. Right, hello everyone, thank you for coming, and thank you to Julie for that. Sorry, how many people were here because of Thread Survivors or part of? The time I bought This Is Spinal Tap. I'm not sure what that says about me, but a bit of a palate cleanser anyway. So yeah, I took it home and I watched it. I remember it was a late Sunday evening. I watched it in a back room of my girlfriend's house at the time, and she was like a year younger than me. Completely bounced off the film like it was, I don't know, Deep Impact or something like that. Like, just had made no dent in it whatsoever. And I just remember looking at the TV after the...
In an urban society, everything connects. Each person's needs are fed by the skills of many others. Our lives are woven together in a fabric. But the connections that make society strong also make it vulnerable.
As we expected, nearly all the supermarket shelves are empty, but we've managed to get the warehouses controlled by the police. As yet, we haven't located all the root vegetable clumps on local farms, but stocks of sugar, wheat, flour and rice are quite good.
Attack warning? Is it for real? Attack warning? It's for bloody real! Is it? Right, get to your stations. Come on, get ready, generator! Shut the doors!
Well, as soon as you can, every single scrap of information you've got on casualties, but I must have got you.
There is already
Yeah.
Welcome to Manchester's one of two remaining nuclear bunkers in Manchester. Okay, it's not quite where you think it's going to be. So behind us, looking like a refugee from the 1950s, is still the tallest office block in the UK outside London, before they turn it into flats in a few weeks, which is the Cooperative Insurance Society Tower. Built in 1954. It's very, very tall. And it's part of this entire quarter is the Co-op quarter. So all the buildings have CWS or Co-op written on them somewhere. New Century Hall is all Co-op. It's a whole section. We walk past One Angel Square, which is the new international headquarters of the Co-op Society, which looks like a big pillar. But in the 1950s, they decided they wanted to build this massive office block to put the Insurance Society in it. And the Manchester Corporation said, we'll help you with that. We'll give you some money. Can we borrow your control room? When you do. Because when they were building it, and they were putting in all the different stuff, they added a nuclear bomb-proof control room. It's not at the top. It did use CCTV. It was one of the first places to use CCTV in the city centre. There's a couple of pictures here from 2013 when we got to visit, when it was in use as the employee gym. I'll pass this round, don't worry. And basically it was a very, very well protected set of rooms, and it was just where this lower building meets the taller building. So the big one at the back is CIS Tower, the one at the side is the support building, helps keep it upright. And actually the reason why it's no longer in use, because up until the 1980s this smaller building was fully tiled.
Asbestos.
No, they weren't that tiled with asbestos, but when they fall off from that height,
the external tiles,
it caused a problem.
Yeah.
So the tiles started falling off the building. It wasn't cost effective to replace them, so the building became less and less used, and is now going to be converted into flats. So yeah, the first 2 pages are the photographs of the control centre, and what was basically a very, very, very well air-conditioned gym. Still absolutely in use. It could still close those doors, turn the ventilators on and use it as a control room in case of a national emergency, or in case there was an incident happening outside. Now obviously, the bomb drops on Manchester, even before we have all our lovely recent tower blocks, one of the first things that's going cartwheeling off down the river is the CIS building. So the bunker is actually designed to be at the break-off point, and it's not for the people that work there. they are not in a survivable situation if a nuclear bomb goes off in Manchester. So basically the tower from that 4th or 5th floor there disappears completely, along with the support, leaving the bunker.
Wow.
And importantly, there isn't a pile of rubble above it. Yeah, so even in the 1950s they were sensible enough not to build a nuclear bunker underneath 4 stories of town hall. Yeah? And when we go and see Guardian later on, Guardian is built very, very deeply and has lots and lots of exits in all different parts of Manchester. The reason why the Threads bunker is so woefully inefficient is it was the council had to build it. And they had to build it on very short notice, and they had to build it because the government ordered them to.
It was improvised, wasn't it?
Yeah, so a lot of these buildings that had been around for a while, that were made out of concrete, they suddenly discovered the cellars and they started putting desks and beds in there, little toilets, and thought, it'll be fine. Obviously, it was not going to be fine. So your survival rate in a council bunker was about 2 weeks, which is marginally longer than it was in an ROC post. And in the Guardian bunker, the survival rate was actually slightly longer. 6 whole weeks if you made it there. You weren't going to make it there. If you were already in it, you had 6 weeks of supplies. If you weren't in it, you're not coming.
What's the survival time in that?
In the control room, not very long. It's only about 10 rooms. There wouldn't have been a lot of supplies. So it's very much an immediate response, and then yeah, we've been bombed, thank you, bye. Yeah.
What will happen to that when it gets converted to apartments?
I presume they'll do something similar. If it's set up as a gym, they'll keep using it as a gym for the
They'll be
people.
putting a down deposit on the bunker.
Yeah. A bit damp. Has everyone had a chance to look at the pictures?
No.
I've got around here, yeah.
Making its way around. No problem. So, this is not a really sustainable bunker. And one of the things that you'll realise from having watched Threads, you'll realise from having done any research, no real bunker is sustainable. Even if you go to Burlington or the ones that are really, really big ones, they weren't designed to last a very long time. If you were important enough, you were put on a boat. And the boat buggered off to the middle of the Antarctic Ocean, or the Arctic Ocean, and then went to Iceland.
Are you talking about the Queen?
The Queen, yeah.
She hid in the locks, didn't she? She didn't go out to sea because of the Soviet submarines.
Sort of. But yeah. So the boat hid in the locks, she was helicoptered to the boat buggered off. The idea was by then there were no Soviet submarines left. Because what the Soviets didn't know what the Americans did is that the Soviets knew exactly where the Americans knew exactly where every single Soviet submarine was due to the underwater listening system, but they didn't tell anybody they had until the 1990s. That's a theme You'll see this theme of having stuff and not telling anybody about it coming through again and again. So, one of 2 remaining nuclear bunkers in Manchester, but it's not the Manchester Central Control. It's not where the Manchester version of Clive and his team would have gone. They wouldn't have had time to get there anyway, and it wouldn't have been big enough. Really, what they've got is an extra little space there that's reporting back to them from the city centre. Alright, so we're going to have a look at what was around before the nuclear bunkers. Right, now, we're going back slightly earlier than Threads. We're going back to the time when the German Air Force Redevelopment Committee were visiting Manchester on a regular basis. Right? 1940.
Were they looking for targets?
You usually get one laugh. I've had laughs from German groups on that one. Bloody hell. So, all these lovely buildings you see around you, these big Victorian buildings, they are the survivors of a levelling that happened in this location in 1940. Everywhere you see a lovely shiny new building like the football museum just there, it was a bomb site. And while this was happening, they needed to keep Manchester running, they needed to keep Manchester working, and they did that by using command centres and control centres that were underground. Right? And a lot of places did this. You've got to imagine all the fuel and all the goods and all the people from Canada and America are coming to Liverpool. They're coming from Liverpool along the ship canal to Manchester, and then they're getting on the train here and going to Yorkshire. They get on the train at Piccadilly and going to London. Alright, so if the Germans can stop this and break this chain, it's a massive thing for them. So what you're going to do, you're going to try and keep all this running. You're going to do it by using command centres. One of the big command centres for the railway has never been found. They've never found the Manchester area command centre that kept the railways running during World War II. Until 4 years ago, I was part of a group that put on a art installation. Quite mad, but it was underground, so I said yes. So if you go down through this building and go down 3 stories, it actually connects under the road to this building and to that one there, the Stoller Hall, what was on the place before that. There are big tunnels down there. There's rivers down there. There's all sorts of rooms down there. There's all sorts of cholera victims down there, which is always fun. So what we did was we put a brewery in there and brewed a beer called A Touch of Pandemic. It was before. We didn't know. And while we were there, we went for a wander and we found these rooms. These rooms are all similar size, similar shape. They're all whitewashed walls. They have an excellent air conditioning unit. As in, I crawled inside and pretended to be Die Hard. Right? They have bakelite switches on the walls. They have strip lights on the ceiling and lights that are angled on the walls to give light dropping onto the walls. There's even industrial green on the doors. It is the control centre for the railways and nobody knew. They just abandoned it in 1945, they moved everything out, back up into the office blocks and left it. The archaeologist that was on site didn't know what it was. The historians that we're working with didn't know what it was. Passed all the information over, did a sub-Brit survey, great, no problem. And only very recently, last year, this year we came on a special visit because they're going to break the link between these two by some work underneath the road. And the last chance to visit and go down, through and underneath, chatting to the archaeologist on site, I said, what are you doing about the control room? She went, what control room? So if you go through that door and down there, there's the control room. It's the only one that's never been found. We know where the others are, blah, 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 blah. I'll make a note. I doubt she did. But this is what they thought was going to happen again in 1954. In 1954, a big thing happened. The Russians blew something up, and it was big, and it was scary, and it would reach Britain. And suddenly, all the Anderson shelters in the world are not going to protect you. And suddenly, the civil defence that you've got in place, Fred from Call the Midwife with his beret, not going to help anymore. The Russians can now not only attack Eastern Europe and Germany, they can attack Britain. They dusted off all the plans. They started looking at all these air raid shelters underneath the town hall, underneath Victoria Station, and underneath a lot of the office blocks, and they're all too shallow. 3 stories under here is not a suitable place if an atom bomb, or even an atomic bomb rather than a hydrogen bomb, goes off above here. So even an air burst on a building of this size would drop the entire building into the hole, and anything below it is now strawberry jam. So they put in all this place, they put in all this thought, what are we going to do, what are we going to do? And what they decided was they were going to look at expanding the communications network in Manchester instead, because they decided really early on, far earlier than you realise, nuclear war is not survivable for the vast majority of the population. They knew even in the 1950s that civil defence was not sustainable. It was a something to keep people busy, and what they needed was the communications, the information instead. So we're going to go by the Football Museum and along Corporation Street into right in the centre of Manchester. We're going to see what did they do to look at getting that communication through, and how did they protect the people of Manchester in the case of an atom bomb. So please cross the road safely.
Now it's recording.
Nice. How are we doing? Is that everybody? Excellent. Welcome to the medieval centre of Manchester. The medieval centre of Manchester is here because there was a market over there on Market Street, there was a big church that turned into a cathedral, and our arch nemesis, who we dislike even more than Yorkshire, which is Salford City Council, are over there. So this is the boundary between Manchester and Salford. There is a point to this. Salford was not a nuclear-free city. Salford had a bit more money than Manchester Council in 1983, and they built a nice big nuclear bunker under their town hall, which is currently used for storage, and no one's been able to get into it for ages. But the main thing that you've got with Manchester, and the reason why this is all here, is a big lump of sandstone. If you've ever been to Nottingham, if you've ever been to Sheffield, lots of caves, lots of holes, lots of sandstone, and that same band of sandstone comes up into the centre of Manchester. It makes it extremely stable underground. You can dig holes through sandstone without putting any shoring up at the sides, like you don't have to do like a coal mine thing. You can just dig a hole and it will stay up as long as you don't dig too big a hole. It's very stable, but with it being at the surface, one of the problems that Manchester Corporation had, they could dig really big holes, and as soon as a bomb dropped of any size, it would collapse the whole thing, because it's all connected. So I used to work in Stockport. Stockport is 6 miles away from us here, in the air raid shelters, which are dug in sandstone from World War II. When they were sat in the air raid shelters in World War II, they could hear and feel the bombs landing here. Again, this is all empty space thanks to the German Air Force Redevelopment Committee. Thank you. Now I don't know what it is about Manchester, but every 20 years or so, some ignorant git tries to blow us up. It happened in the 1930s with the IRA, it happened in the 1940s with the Germans, in the 1960s, 70s, 80s and 90s with the very persistent provisional IRA, and in 2000s we've just passed the memorial to the arena bombing. The arena's just over there. It happens a lot. I wouldn't say we were used to it, but I saw my first machine gun outside my nana's house in Cheetham Hill, held by a police officer when I was 5. Yeah. Somebody had just bombed something big in central Manchester. But everything's very close together. Now, one of the reasons that we've stopped here, not only because to tell you about the sandstone and about the city being next door, if you look behind you, if anything does remain of the CIS Tower, which was the tallest building in Manchester, right up until the late 90s, early 2000s, if there's anything left up there, the cameras are still running, that control room can tell the council what's going on. Yep. It's got a commanding viewpoint right over the city centre, and can also tell you, because this lot wasn't here, can also tell you what's happening in Salford city centre. You can probably from the top, I suspect, see Tameside and Trafford as well. Some of the 8 cities in Manchester, Greater Manchester. You're going to see a fair proportion of them from the top of that tower. It's not a bad idea to have good links, just in case it does survive that first blast. Now, we've heard that there were various bunkers in the town. You'll hear it from all over the place. So there was a bunker under the town hall, there was a bunker in Parsonage Gardens, there was a bunker here, there was a bunker there. A lot of them were repurposed World War II air raid shelters. Some of them were still full of blankets and gas masks and hard hats, as much use as they would be against a nuclear bomb. It suited the council before 1980 to let people believe that. Do you remember me telling you I was going to tell you what the council was going to do to protect the people of Manchester? They were going to bugger off as fast as they could and not look back. There's a reason Manchester is not a word, thank you, in the script of Threads. Buxton is the closest we come to Manchester, and that's a good long way away. All right, there is nothing left here. There is nothing left of Greater Manchester. All right, and the corporation knew that, the government knew that, and we're going to show you how as we go down Deansgate here, which is the main road in Manchester. We're going to pop into Parsonage Gardens, which is the location of the second suspected council bunker. All right, so we look at 2 suspected council bunkers, and we're going to see 2 real bunkers. We've seen one over there, we're going to see the last one in the end. All good? Does anybody have any questions and wants to shout them over the buses? Cool, don't get run over. Right, so the second supposed council bunker. All right, so we've already got one. There was one underneath Victoria Station, but there wasn't. There was an old air raid shelter. The second one was under Arkwright House, which is this slice of 1930s wonderfulness, right? Because it's concrete framed building. It's one of the first. We've got 3 of the very first concrete framed buildings here in Manchester, and they were built in the 1930s, long before anyone else had them. And that meant they were a lot stronger in the case of a blast than the rest of the brick buildings or House of Fraser or anything like that. So this building actually goes down 4 stories below us, which was interesting because this is a massive graveyard. Parsonage Gardens has a lot of dead bodies in it, upwards of 40,000. And it went a lot further that way before they built this building. So you will hear people telling you there was an extra council bunker and it was underneath here. It's now Revolution. Revolution does go downstairs. It's lovely down there. I recommend you go and have a vodka, but it's not a nuclear bunker, right? And it follows the same problem that they had in Threads. If there was a bomb dropped on Manchester, that building's going to drop straight on that bunker, and then all these other buildings are going to land on top of it. All right, and what the Manchester Corporation knew, and hadn't told anybody, is that Manchester was aimed in the 1960s to have 2 bombs, both ground bursts. All right, because they wanted to get Manchester and Salford and put the ship canal out of commission in one big go. All right, so this is all gone. This is a big smoking hole in the ground. All right, and that's why Guardian is so deep. So when we go and look at Guardian, which is 138 feet below Manchester Centre, all right, it's so far below anything that's been done before because of the sandstone effects and because they knew this was a proper target and it was going to get bombed. They told the general public there might be 1 airburst, right? And then not just, they told their staff, they told their emergency services, they told civil defence and St John Ambulance, one airburst above central Manchester. They already knew there were going to be 2 ground bursts, and this was very early on. This was when Russia did not have thousands of nuclear bombs to waste on a relatively small provincial city. You know, if you go to somewhere like Edinburgh, they'll say Edinburgh is the 2nd best city in the world after London. If you go to Sheffield or Yorkshire or somewhere like that, oh, Leeds, Birmingham, oh, the 2nd best city after London. Do you know what we say here? London's the 2nd best city after us. Right?
Tale of two cities.
Yeah. This is a thriving centre. This is a prime target. All right, and the people in charge knew that, even if they were lying to the people below. All right, so you know in Threads where they send the fire engines out to keep them safe, they sent the fire engines to central Manchester from London Road Station down to Stockport. Stockport is 6 miles away. Stockport is next to Manchester Airport. Stockport has its own bomb coming. Yeah, and the fire engines from Stockport they sent to Buxton. Yeah. They're going to be no use anyway. There's going to be no water. All right, and even if they can get back in to the irradiated wasteland that is central Manchester, there's nobody to save. All right, they're not coming back. Like the lifeboats in Titanic, those fire engines are not coming back. They're being kept safe for a future time. All right. So there isn't actually a bunker under there. I'm really sorry, but it looks really pretty. Yay! Yay! So we're going to go, yeah, so we're in the 1960s. Where is Manchester Corporation going to be, firstly in the 1950s and then in the 1960s? In the 1950s, and this is long before the 1980s and Threads and that building your own area, your own little shelter, they were in a place called Palatine Road. Palatine Road is 3 miles down from central Manchester, and it was one of the government and council training schools. And they had a bunker built in the grounds of Palatine Road. I've got photos, some of you might have seen it, it's on the pile. So this is the Palatine Road bunker. You're welcome to have a look at it. It's very 1950s. It's made out of brick. It's not underground. It doesn't have any aircon, and it doesn't have any blast doors. So in fact, it's worse than the World War II bunkers that they actually built 15-20 years earlier. All right, that is where the people were reporting to from the CIS tower. That is where the people were reporting to from the town hall, upper stories, where they sent some poor sod to stand with a telephone going, yeah, I can see a plane. Yeah, so that's 2 or 3 miles away. That, for an atom bomb air burst, it'd flatten it, but they might survive. Okay, remember they already knew that's not what they were getting, and 3 miles is far too close for even an atomic bomb. Yeah, and then in the 1950s they invent the hydrogen bomb. They are much bigger. All right, and they decide that the bunker at Palatine Road is completely useless. They knew this already, but they decided, all right, we're going to admit to this. So they closed down the bunker at Palatine Road and they moved to a brand new actual nuclear bunker in Cheadle, 7 miles from Manchester. This was a proper nuclear bunker. It was built by the government. It had the proper blast doors, it had air filtration units, it was nuclear bomb proof.
We'll do that.
It was half and half, so half above ground, half below ground. And it stood in the grounds of Cheadle Royal Hospital until 2002, I think, where it was demolished because they needed more car parking spaces.
Oh.
Yay! So this was the bunker from 1958 until the stand down of civil defence in 1968-69. You'll know this. So in the 1960s they discovered that the hydrogen bomb existed. They realised civil defence was a complete waste of everybody's time. They disbanded the entire organisation. They sold off all the Land Rovers. Wish I knew where they'd gone. They sold off all the buildings. They folded people into the fire service, and they basically mothballed all these little bunkers. All right, so this bunker gets mothballed in the 1960s and just sits there until 1980. And what happens in 1980 is the government decides every local council is going to be responsible for their own nuclear protection. All the local councils went, no, we don't have any money. You've stiffed us for 12 years, and we don't have any bunkers, we don't have any supplies. We're finding blankets. The blankets in threads are from World War II. You see those greyish blankets they pull out at the school yard, those are World War II blankets. The things like the beds that we're putting in places like this, the toilets, the Elsans, are all World War II vintage. So a lot of the local governments go, okay, we'll build something, we'll reinforce some rooms in the town hall. The government went, that's not good enough, we're going to force you. And they bring into law an actual law that says local government buildings have to have a command centre capable of withstanding nuclear attack. And they have to have it built and up and running by the summer of 1990.
End of the Cold War.
Yes. This is why when you occasionally go and visit somewhere like York Cold War bunker that is in pristine condition, it's because it was finished just after the Berlin Wall came down, Russia imploded and was completely useless. Yeah. So the local government in Manchester turned around and said, we're not doing it. We're not going to build a bunker. We're going to repurpose this one. All right. By this stage, they have even more information about what the Soviet threat to Manchester was going to be. Manchester, Greater Manchester, is a very big place. Like I say, I think it's 8 cities in one. All right. They've gone up from having 2 bombs. Manchester is now recommended for 6 ground bursts. Yep. 2 of which are on the city centre, 1 of which is aimed at this garden. This is the aiming point for one of the 2 central Manchester bombs. Even if you stood here and you survive, which you're not going to do, the ones that are all around are going to start hitting. So, what does Manchester Corporation do? They declare that Manchester is a nuclear-free city. They put some signs up and they say no longer will they allow nuclear fuel to go along the ship canal or to go along the railways. That's pretty big. That's a massive thing. That impacts really strongly on the government moving nuclear weapons.
Sellafield.
Well, Sellafield nuclear fuel is going to make nuclear weapons, but you have to move them from place to place, otherwise the Soviets know where they are and they bomb them. Even today, one of the most secret things you can have in the UK is when they move nuclear weapons from the submarine bases in Scotland to the air bases in England. They have huge convoys that travel around. They're tracked by CND. If you see one, they're very, very specific. You know immediately what it is.
Oh, yeah.
And
they're very well camouflaged.
You can report it to CND and they'll know where the nuclear bombs are moving to and from. So this is actually quite irritating to central government. First off, the council says we're not going to build a bunker. Secondly, they say we're going to turn it into a nuclear-free city. We're not going to allow you to move nuclear weapons through this city. And everyone goes, well, it's a fake. It doesn't exist. It's not like they're not going to bomb Manchester. They knew that. The council knew that. But they thought it was worth a try to tell the truth. And they told the truth with this. This is emergency planning a nuclear war in Greater Manchester. All right. So this came out just after Protect and Survive, and it tells the truth about what would happen to Manchester in a nuclear war. It was, I think, 50 pence to buy. It's incredibly rare. I was bidding on one copy on eBay. I lost it to Taris Young. If anyone's got Taris's book, I was very annoyed. I sent him a message. Taris, I wanted that from Manchester. You're from Edinburgh. And he put it in his book, and I felt better. But this is one of the maps that they published in that guide. So while the government is sending out Protect and Survive and recording these things, saying put yourself in a little shelter in your front room, put yourself underneath some doors with bags of soil and things on top, it's just so they can collect the bodies afterwards. That's all. It just keeps the messiness into one quite small
They wanted
place.
you to keep your savings cards and ID on you, and so it was all just about
it was all
identification
about-
post-war.
Yeah. So, this is Greater Manchester. We've got Wigan, Bolton, Rochdale, Oldham, Tameside, Stockport, Trafford, Salford, Manchester in the centre. We're under this bomb here. The second one we're going to look at in a minute is just over there. This is Manchester Airport. No, sorry, that's Manchester Airport. This, if you've ever been to Hat Green nuclear bunker. Yep. Yeah, we love Hat Green. They were on the list. The Soviets knew exactly where Hat Green was. They got their own bomb.
They've just followed the road sign.
Exactly. Hat Green would have lasted about 0.2 of a second longer than Manchester. But they do very good, what's those things where you shake it and the snow comes down? Snow globes. If you buy a snow globe from there, it's got Hat Green with a nuclear cloud in the background, and you can shake it to get the fallout coming down.
Just like the Chernobyl ones.
Yeah. The bomb is actually on Manchester. If you look at the way they've angled it, the bomb is actually on Manchester, which is always good. Now, these circles are destruction levels. So, obviously, in the centre, there is nothing left. You're talking flats, completely flats, not even piles of rubble. We're talking like Nevada levels of glass, fused.
And craters.
And craters.
Vaporised.
Well, all that muck's got to go somewhere, and it goes up. It goes up into the mushroom cloud, and then it falls as fallout. And you know, in Threads they said it's Crewe that's falling on Sheffield. Manchester, depending on the prevailing winds, would have fallen on Ireland or Wales. So all those people travelling to Wales, not going to help you. All right. And then you have a pattern slightly further out, which is about 6 miles of destroyed buildings, unsurvivable destroyed buildings. Those are the ones that are piles of rubble. They're on fire with the hands sticking up. All right. There is nothing here left in those areas. A bit further out, you've lost your roof, you've lost all your windows. All right. You're getting cold, you're getting fallout coming in. Those points could, if you'd built your shelter with your 2 planks of wood or your doors, and you had 2 weeks of food, and you listened, and you only came out, they would have lasted another 14 days. Because there's nobody coming back. Now, I have some lovely numbers for you. But I'll tell you those in the Hiroshima Peace Garden. All right? And we're going to go down and then cross over the big road, and we're going to go up to the Hiroshima Peace Garden. Yep. Welcome to Manchester's Peace Garden. This was opened in 1983 when the Manchester became a nuclear-free city, on the understanding that the Russians wouldn't bomb a peace garden. Yes. You've got to imagine that Manchester Corporation in 1983 is now a master at taking the piss out of the government. They are ripping them a new one with every press release. They are putting signs up all around the city centre that say Manchester's a nuclear-free city in a lovely blue and yellow font. Yeah. And when the government said, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "That's what we're using the money you wanted us to spend on building a bunker." And it was for publicity. It was all for publicity. The idea was that if they could stop a nuclear war, ideally, that would be the best way of doing it, rather than spending lots of money and then not surviving it anyway. So,
There's still one by the People's History Museum.
Is there?
If you walk down by the river, I was the last time I went down.
I'll have to go and have a look.
Yeah,
That's where the the blue post box is.
I don't remember that. But was it?
Yeah. So this is central Manchester as of the 1980s. Okay. Town Hall's just over there, just reappearing from its wrapping after a 6-year restoration programme, which is what happens when you don't spend any money on it for 180 years. All right. So when people tell you there's a massive nuclear bunker under the town hall, They didn't have flushing toilets in the 1980s. They were working with 1890s technology. There's no way that they could do it. What they could do is look at the buildings right next to the town hall. So next to the town hall is something called the Town Hall Extension Building. It was built in 1930, and it is again one of the lovely cluster of concrete framed buildings. It was massive, and it was built as one of these really big 1930s projects. It had a theatre in the basement, a cinema in the basement, and it had an air raid shelter in the basement. If you're on Thread Survivors, you'll have seen comments. One lad, his mum was the environment officer during the 1980s. He worked at the town hall, and he was like, he said, we saw the shelter. His mum would have gone to Cheadle. That was abandoned long before the 1980s. It's still there now. You can visit if you ask really, really nicely, and it's still got all the signage from World War II on it. It doesn't have any aircon, it doesn't have any blast doors, it doesn't have anything to show that it's a nuclear building. All right, so we have debunked. Hey! 3 bunkers now. All right, but we have seen one real bunker, and we know where the real bunkers for the council were. They were a long way away, not far enough away, because the Cheadle bunker, the one they've moved to because it's safer, is just about on that line there next to Manchester Airport, and has disappeared in a puff of smoke and is heading somewhere towards Wales or Crewe or wherever their fallout is going to land. Manchester Corporation knew, just like the government knew many decades before, that nuclear war was unsurvivable in the UK. Not in the cities, not in the country, nowhere. They knew even before the Russians invented the hydrogen bomb, or got their hydrogen bomb, that this was unsustainable. All right? And they were petrified, the government were petrified that various ongoing governments were going to give up the nuclear weapons. Because the only thing that would stop the Soviets bombing the UK would be complete unilateral disarmament, no American bases, no American bombs, no V-bombers. Where's, show me t-shirt. No V-bombers, no Valiants, no Vulcans. Yeah, and Victors. To just completely give up any hope of being a nuclear power. All right? Now you've got to remember, the UK has never been really a sustainable nuclear power anyway. When you're looking at the hundreds of bombs or thousands of bombs that the US and Russia had, or the Soviets had, the UK never had anywhere near that many. All right? It was very much a prestige thing. Now, you do have to take on board that if they had unilaterally got rid of all the nuclear weapons, if they had got rid of all that and thrown the Americans out, we would have been speaking Russian in about a week.
And don't forget 7 Days to the Rhine, where
2 weeks.
Everyone familiar with 7 Days to the Rhine?
Yeah.
The Poles in the 90s declassified a document written by the Soviets themselves. This was a war plan, and they didn't nuke France, they didn't nuke the UK because we were nuclear states and we could nuke them back. However, they did nuke neutral Vienna in Austria.
Yes. So West Germany and Austria were not going to be there. Partly because the Russians were going to roll over them instantly, but also because some of the very few nuclear bombs we did have were buried in Germany.
With chickens?
With chickens. And if you want to look up the chicken nuclear bomb, it's a very entertaining read and a terrifying thought.
They buried them with chickens.
And then when the Russian troops came into West Germany, they would have been blown up from underneath by nuclear bombs and chickens. Yes. Oh dear. Oh dear.
And that's where we end today's tour.
No, we're going to go to one more location. We're going to go past the town hall and town hall extension. We're going to head to Guardian. All right. Now, the pavement outside Guardian entrance that we're going to visit is quite narrow. You do get taxis going down there, so please just watch yourselves and stay nice and close so that we can you can hear what I'm saying. All right. Does everybody know what Guardian is? Yeah.
Pick me, pick me.
I want to know if anybody doesn't know what my Guardian is. Excellent, you're going to have a great visit in a few minutes. And it had loads of stuff underneath it. That is the town hall extension. It's arguably bigger than the town hall. And like I say, it goes down another 2 stories underneath that. It's got these great big spaces. Central Library here was opened not long before that, and at the same time this had a theatre in the cellar and loads of space. But the actual World War II control room for the town was under there. Yep, and it's still under there. Almost. Never good music. It was good music. Or you lot. So, welcome to the least best kept secret in Manchester.
Yes.
Now, in the 1950s, after the German Air Force Redevelopment Committee, yes, made some nice big wide spaces in Manchester Central, the idea was that they were going to build lots of new buildings. All right, and the government at that time already knew that a city was unsurvivable in a nuclear war. Okay, now what did they do with this information? Did they tell everybody?
No, they buried it.
They buried it.
Oh, come on.
Yes.
Didn't even get a groan.
But they needed the information, and they needed to keep information running up and down the country, and they did that by creating a system called Backbone. And it was called Backbone because it ran from London right up the centre of the country. It went from Kingsway in London to Birmingham to Manchester to Glasgow. From Glasgow it went across.
Go on. Oban. To Oban.
It went to Oban. Oban is on the other side of Scotland. What's on the other side of Scotland from Glasgow? America. It's how you spoke to America. All right, in the days before radio and major stuff like that. So this cable needed to run right underneath and very, very deep underneath the UK. It had to be top secret. So while they were digging out all these spaces and all these bomb sites, they carried on digging. They imported Polish labourers and engineers and architects, and they built a secret underground tunnel underneath the centre of Manchester, and one underneath Birmingham, and one underneath Glasgow, and one underneath Kingsway, next to the tram tunnel if you've ever been to central London. Now, this was top secret. This was so top secret that when Manchester Corporation in the early 1960s designed an underground system for Manchester, like the one in Liverpool, like the one in Glasgow, like the one in London, they put all these plans together. They went to central government for funding, and central government went, yeah, sorry, can't actually do that because we've already built a network of tunnels 134 feet underneath central Manchester. These tunnels run for miles. There's allegedly 3.5 miles of tunnels going out, but they're 2 miles in diameter. We've walked over a lot of them already. This is the halfway point. All right, but this is the best place to show you what it looked like, because this is where they moved all the big equipment in. This is where they made the big shaft, and if you look at the building over here, it's the lift shaft, the top of the lift shaft that runs down to the nuclear bunker. It was built nuclear proof because of its depth, and it was built nuclear proof with its air conditioning, its filtration unit and everything. But remember me telling you, the government doesn't care about people. The government only cares about information. This site, along with all the others, was fully automatic. If you were already in there, if you were based in there and you were running the telephone lines, running the telex lines from the US or from all the different parts of the country, and the bomb dropped, congratulations. You've got about 6 weeks worth of supplies. They had a machine shop down there, they had a canteen, they had a bar. In the canteen they had those wonderful paintings on the walls that looked like the outside. Yeah, but you still only got 6 weeks. All right. Now, they weren't in the same situation as the Threads bunkerites. This is a big place and it has multiple entrances. This is just this is like the staff entrance where they move all the big equipment in and out. In Dial Place, which is just further down the road, inside the BT building, you can still go down. There's a set of steps that lead down. There's emergency exits out beyond Piccadilly Station, which is nearly a mile that way, and emergency exits in Salford, which is a completely different city, which is all the way over that way. There are allegedly more tunnels, because like anything with this, people just keep adding and adding to it. Now, it was top secret until 1968. Then they sort of went, yeah, it's there, I'm sorry, you can't have an underground system. You'll have to get trams back. And it ran through until the late 1980s. In the late 1980s, when everything changed to do with communications and there's no longer a Soviet threat anymore, it became much more open. At that time you could book visits and you could go down and walk around, and it was used for filming of police dramas and things like that as abandoned spaces. I've got some photos of a visit in 2000 that are quite good because they show what it looked like before it was completely stripped. So in the 90s it was an open secret. They didn't bother with the razor wire anymore. You could see through the letterbox. If you want to look through the letterbox, it's very good, except it's now got a plate on the other side. You can't see anything. You can see the top of the building from across the road. It's just a brick building with a very good filtration unit and a big door in it. It used to be that if you stood here too long, a police officer would come and talk to you from the local police station, which was just up the road, but they closed that down now, so you're usually quite fine. So in the 1990s, it's pretty derelict. The equipment's not being used very much. They stripped everything out that made it usable. So they took out the canteen, they took out the workshop, they took out all the stuff, just left the equipment down there, and it became like an open secret. After 2000, the internet arrives properly. So this is now where the internet lives. That's why the razor wire is back. That's why the police will come if you try and climb over the wall. It is alarmed up to the eyeballs. If you try to break in, they do still have armed guards that will come and see you from BT. BT have their own armed guards that will come and talk to you very, very forcefully if you try to break in. So for example, in the 1990s, someone actually broke in and rode a bicycle through all the tunnels and filmed it. You can't do that now.
Was that Duncan Campbell?
I think it was Duncan Campbell, or somebody he was with, yeah.
There's a very famous photo of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, do BT then have their own police? So, like,
they have security, yes. So their security, a bit like the nuclear police. If it's a special location, they're allowed to have weapons. My brother-in-law is a telephone engineer in Birmingham, and I said to him once, have you ever seen Anchor, which is the Birmingham one? No, we're never allowed anywhere near that. Get me a picture. No. But somebody had put a video on YouTube and said, we found Anchor, we got into Anchor. They put this video on, I showed it to Simon, and Simon went, yeah, they're nowhere near. They're literally hundreds of feet below this like manhole cover they found. And they were found and escorted off the premises very, very quickly. So this is the proper nuclear bunker. This is what was supposed to survive a nuclear attack on Manchester. Not the people, not the government, not the local central government, not the local council government, not the people. They would all have been swept away. This would have kept clicking away with nobody in there for decades. And that would have connected central London to America long after central London is an irradiated wasteland. Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, all of those, it's all totally automated. So just to put the casualties for Manchester in, because you've seen the casualties for Sheffield on the threads today, and so if a 1 megaton bomb exploded above Manchester, this is what the government said would happen. 1 megaton bomb, it would completely destroy the city centre and do severe blast damage as far away as Stockport, Ashton, Worsley and Hale, which is 7 miles out. That's the one bomb above the surface. At least 300,000 people would die instantly, twice that number seriously injured, and you would have a 12-mile radius of unsurvivable injuries. This is one bomb 8,000 feet above us. All right. Anyone caught out in the open, which could be up to 200,000 people, would receive third-degree burns as far as Failsworth and Prestwich, which are a long way away. You know, you're not outrunning this. That is the government's best case scenario. If you read the Emergency Planning and Nuclear War in Manchester book, which, to be fair, is the council saying this is why we're not going to build any bunkers, they would be hit several times at once. They looked at 7 bombs dropped on the ground. 7 bombs landing at once or at the same similar time. 1.4 million people killed instantly. Another 1 million would be affected by radiation, most of whom would die within 2 months. In total, Manchester's population in 1983 was 2.8 million people. 4 weeks after an attack, 2.6 million of those people would be dead. And that's why they don't mention Manchester in the film Threads. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. Yeah. And it's not so bleak. And it didn't rain at all, which is absolutely fantastic. I can answer some questions if anybody's got any, but other than that, thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Security. We're talking about nuclear bunkers plans. No famous people on the phone. Only you.
Hi guys, that's it for the day. I'm going to be signing off now, heading back to York. Thank you very much for your watching of this. It's a little bit longer than the usual videos that I would do, but I really appreciate that you've stayed with us and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please drop us a like and a subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, it's absolutely free, but it really helps out the channel. Have a great evening. Thanks now, bye.